And now, for our next discussion, please welcome US Senator representing Michigan, the Honorable Elissa Slotkin, joining Executive Director for SAFE's Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, Rachel McCleery.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Senator, for being here today.
Sure.
As I was joking with you backstage, I'm a Michigander. I'm a product of the auto industry, so I have like 2 hours worth of questions that I could ask you, but we only have 15 minutes.
Okay.
So let's just jump into it. Earlier today, this audience heard perspectives from ITIF and American Compass about what would happen to our economic and national security if Chinese vehicles suddenly became available to US consumers. You have been vocal about this. You've been sounding the alarm bell for a very long time, long before Donald Trump made comments signaling that could happen back in January. At one point, you called Chinese vehicles traveling surveillance packages. This is serious stuff. So I'd love it if you could walk us through how you've been working to combat this issue, your previous legislative work, and then what are you thinking about moving forward to combat this threat?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you have a problem with Huawei or TikTok just sucking up the data from, the United States of America, from our kids, from our military bases, our infrastructure, like cars are that times 10, right? And just as someone who's a former CIA officer and Pentagon official, I've asked, including today with the head of NSA and Cybercom, just the details that the Chinese government would have if these vehicles were here collecting all that and sending it back to Beijing. It would give them such an advantage on things like military planning. So this has been an issue of mine for many years now, and actually my first official bill as a senator was on banning Chinese vehicles. I think the thing to do now is, like, we're all focused on the summit that the president is scheduled to have with Xi Jinping on the 14th. That's a big deal. And we're all very interested in what is going to be decreed in that summit, what's going to be agreed to. And when the president comes to Detroit, of all places, and says, maybe it's time to let in Chinese vehicles into the United States, like, as a Michigander and as a CIA officer, that certainly got my attention. I think the way to do things right now in a way that's effective, and I care about effectiveness, is bipartisan. We have to have that bipartisan message. So there's a group of us who are very focused on this, on legislation, on messaging, on private communication, public. So that, to me, is the way that we bring together, like, our economic security issues and our national security issues, and make the case to the president and the people around him, like, find something else to give on. Don't give away the farm when you're just to make a deal.
Yeah, and I think everybody's going to be paying very close attention to see what happens and the likelihood of a deal or a no deal.
Yeah.
And certainly when we think about how these vehicles are more affordable, it could be an economic investment, right? Being able to keep those risks front and center for the American people and understand that this is not your iPhone. This is a vehicle that has so many more capabilities, right? And making that real. But regardless of what happens, next month between the US and China, Canadians will soon be able to purchase Chinese-made vehicles. So for those who live in Canada and work or travel to Michigan, that's BYD and Geely vehicles coming over the Ambassador Bridge to Detroit and back, which is so crazy to think that Southeast Michigan might be the space that we start seeing more Chinese vehicles because of what China has done. I'd love for you to talk about the national security risk associated with what Canada's doing and that trickle-down impact it could have in Michigan, particularly from that surveillance perspective, and how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, well, Canada made the announcement more recently, but just to be clear, there are 30 Chinese auto companies active in Mexico right now, and they have 15% of market share. So while it's theoretical from the Canadian border side, it's here on the Mexican border side. And you think about our military bases in Texas. You think about what kind of interesting things those cars would be sucking up. And so the problem is here. I think truly, when I think about the range of risks, I think about them sending detailed 3D full motion video back to Beijing of every infrastructure site, military base, geolocation on anyone driving the car, and then for any device that has Bluetooth, being able to remotely pilot the vehicle. We had, like, in the Czech Republic, the intelligence community put out a public announcement that when the president of Taiwan was there in the Czech Republic, the Chinese had planned on a planned car accident right outside her venue. You can imagine and extrapolate what they would do with this capability. So again, it's here. We were very disappointed to see that decision by the Canadians. This is what happens when you stick your allies in the eyes, right? They respond, but I think the issue is here. And again, there should be a full ban on these things ever even entering the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to this summit, I mean, there's obviously a lot of public pressure that we're seeing bubble up online. The Beijing Auto Show is happening right now. A lot of different influencers are posting about these amazing vehicles that US consumers can't have. How concerned are you that, going back to this potential deal that Trump might make in exchange for these investments, that public pressure is just going to cave certain policymakers or lawmakers, and just to be able to satisfy this consumer desire to want to have cheap, affordable vehicles at a time when gas prices are at an all-time high, right? And we have all these geopolitical considerations.
So I think it's a real thing. Like, people are struggling. I think there's an absolute economic crisis going on in the country right now with a shrinking middle class. So people are extremely cost sensitive. And you throw out like a cool looking, Tesla looking, $11,000, $14,000 vehicle. They're like, well, maybe I want that too. I think what is important to remember is like, we have a national security responsibility, but also this is the Chinese playbook. We've seen them run this play with, let's say, drones, right? They basically often steal our intellectual property, reverse engineer it, put all kinds of government funding into it, subsidize it in a way that our government doesn't do, decrease the price, get everyone else out of the market because suddenly you're trying to compete against this subsidized thing, and then push all the American companies out, and then they have us by the neck, right? This is what we saw with DJI, the drones that they have. It used to be that you could buy a GoPro drone. Anyone seen one of those drones lately? No, they don't exist because they just got completely forced out of the market. That is the playbook they are trying to run on autos, on cars. And so I think we all understand the desire for a cheap car. Just like I understand my nieces and nephews wanting to use TikTok and not caring that their data goes back to Beijing. We have to care as leaders, even when people are just laser focused just on cost.
Certainly. And I'd love to go back to drones. We just talked about that here with Sela and Helsing, and some real bright spots in innovation that's happening here. And when I think of bright spots and drones, I think of Michigan. There's so much capacity that Michigan is building to be able to compete. You mentioned some of the struggles with DJI. How is Michigan responding? Can you talk about some of your leadership to build and onshore some of those software and hardware capabilities here, and where you see the industry going in Michigan and just across the country?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is like, I'm sorry, an advertisement for Michigan, but we have some advantages. We have uninterrupted airspace, the most uninterrupted airspace east of the Mississippi. We have unused spectrum, so if you want to do cool stuff, especially around testing, around spectrum, we have that spectrum. And then we have our manufacturing base. So we are in a great position to be a growth industry. And just in the past 6 months, the Army has designated their first drone testing site in northern Michigan. And we worked hard to get that. So you either should be making your drones or testing your drones in the state of Michigan. And we're pushing that. And there's civilian use, there's military use, there's a ton of value there. I think when you have what we have, this space, right? We have opportunities to do really creative things. And I think for anyone who's looking to be in this business, to expand in their business, Michigan is extremely friendly to this, and we want to have a shot at you. So the red carpet is open.
And maybe going back to just China's stronghold on all of these industries that they've had for now 20 years. This is not something that happened overnight. This has been a strategic plan that they have invested in and state-backed just consistently over time. When we think about China's unique vertical integration, how they're able to churn out these cheap vehicles at mass, and how they're able to infiltrate these markets, obviously, we're a free market economy. They're a CCP-controlled economy. Is there a way for the US government to offer a whole-of-government approach to incentivize and compete with what China is doing to continue to bolster this manufacturing capability with autos?
Well, look, we're a capitalist country, so we're not going to be, nor do I think we should be, like picking and choosing winners and just dumping a ton of American taxpayer dollars into these companies, right? I think we're not going to like break our system and become the Communist Party of China. But what we certainly can do, like in 3 weeks, is actually put our money where our mouth is and get serious about just cracking down on their cheating. Right? 25, 30 years ago now, China was let into the WTO. And they've been abusing the rules of the international system ever since. And we let them get away with it. And so if we're thinking about the crocodile closest to the boat with this summit, instead of thinking about like giving away the farm and allowing Chinese vehicles to come in the United States, how about we crack down on some of the cheating, straight up cheating that they are doing in the international economy? That to me is just, it's never been really taken on by either Democrat or Republican administration. If you're going to talk tough, start by actually cracking down on their illegal behavior.
Yeah. Well, and I have to ask you, obviously, given your position, what the U.S. automakers must be thinking and feeling right now with some of this pressure. And I'm curious, as they are struggling to cost compete, as they're struggling to be able to keep up with some of these run rates, how are you advising them, or are they advising you on a path forward, knowing that this competition is just breathing down their throat, not just to be able to compete domestically, but just globally, the market share that the U.S. automakers have lost and what that means for Michigan?
I mean, whether it's the auto companies, the suppliers,
exactly.
kind of anyone in the auto ecosystem, I think it is fair to say that they're just unable, or it's very difficult, I should say, to navigate the constant pendulum swings and changes in policy coming out of this town. And most companies, they just want predictability and stability so that they can place strategic bets, invest, in critical technologies, and I think it's just become very hard for almost any company to know, is my tariff rate going to be 20% or 5%? Are we pro EV or anti EV? Like, just keeping up with that does not create an environment that is conducive to really rapid growth. And so I feel for the industry, and we're not healthy as a country. And that's why this pendulum swinging is like vomit-inducing, right? To how radical it is. So I think that's number one. And then number two, I mean, you look at what's going on. Like, look at what's going on in Europe, right? We were just talking backstage. Like, the German automakers must be having the conversation. Like, holy crap! The Chinese autos came in 2021, and they have like 15-20% market share in EVs. Is this the end of our industry?
Right.
And so I don't want that as an economic security thing, but as a national security thing, I feel very strongly that the United States should always have a strong manufacturing base, that we need to make things and grow things in this country. We never know how we're going to need it. And I know you talked here on the arsenal of democracy, and like, you're in World War II, and who do you turn to if you have no industrial base to turn to, or all you do is certain niche things? I think that is a national security risk. So the autos are just trying to like keep up, and watching what's going on in Mexico or Europe or Asia or Australia and saying, holy moly, is this, are we pushing back, or is this the beginning of the end?
Right.
And I'm just, as Michigan Senator, we are not going to take that lying down.
Right. It's like, should we have our cycle planning meeting after the May 14th, before, right? I remember dealing with a lot of these conversations when I was at Ford. It's very reactive, and it's deeply impactful to companies that have to plan so many years out. And you made the point about a healthy industrial base. Gene was just saying, you can't have a defense industrial base without an industrial base.
Right.
Everything stems from there. And the Wall Street Journal had a report a couple of weeks ago that talked about how Donald Trump is going to GM and Ford and saying, hey, we need you to boost weapons capacity.
Yeah.
What does something like that mean to you when you hear that happening? And how are you thinking about that context within this conversation of what it means if China were to get a foothold with all of this?
Yeah, I think it's good, right? I think we've seen, and we're in the middle of a war right now where we are concerned about munitions. We're concerned about American weaponry, and having enough of it. And so I think it's good to be having those conversations. I think it's good that they're coming to the people who build things, right? And we love our tech startups in Silicon Valley. We are proud of what we do on innovation out of different places, but that's very different than making things and understanding the engineering and the logistics that go into making things. So we're glad that those conversations are happening. But I think to me, myself, like, this idea that you can just shift lines on a dime, that is like, oh, today, could we make generators today? Or could we, it's like, no, like, this isn't just like turning levers. This isn't software. So I think the more people understand about our industry, I think the more they value it, and the more they understand that you don't just wake up one morning and start making something, a different widget.
Right. Right. Well, hopefully this audience also has a better understanding of that as well. Senator Slotkin, we are out of time. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the Senator for being with us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.